And we don't ask very many questions about what a fact is, or whether it matters if we know that fact, or what would it change if we knew this fact, or are facts the only things that can change us? What spiritual traditions have been eclipsed in the discussion of these facts? And how have they been killed? The original topic for my lecture tonight was actually about secularism, about the difficulty, especially in the United States today, of talking about competing secularisms. What do I mean by this? I know this is complicated. Sí, sí. Puedo repetir, sí. The problem that I was to speak about was about the competition between different forms of secularism, and I'll explain what I mean. Often in the United States, we talk about our liberty being based in the notion that we have freedom of religion, and that the government is without religion, that the government protects our rights to practice our religion, but the government itself is not supposed to be religious. But in effect, that cannot necessarily be true, because we have a Christian culture. It is a multicultural culture, but it is a dominantly Christian culture. And our institutions were developed through that culture. So what one community defines as secular is not the same as what another community defines as secular. And I'm mentioning this now, I know it's a very difficult subject to reintroduce, but it is about not only different beliefs or different religious practices, but it is about whole ways of knowing and understanding the world that are different, and whole ways of imagining a different kind of relationship between the state and religious communities, for example. In the United States, Muslims, for example, are still a minority. And it is a very difficult thing to begin to explain why that minority needs to be the subject of a special kind of attention now, because of the competing versions of what would be an appropriately secular environment. That is, an environment that would make a Muslim woman feel equally protected under the law. This is especially a question for feminists, and increasingly for prison abolitionists. It is a question of prison abolitionists because many Muslims are now interned. There are places in the prison that are easy for us to see, but one of the places we never see is where immigrants are detained. In every prison visit I have ever been to in the United States, I have been prevented from being in a space with any immigrants. And it is in those spaces, I imagine, that many, many things exist that I need to know. It is a special problem for feminists because Arab and Muslim cultures, in the plural, have been mischaracterized in such dramatic ways. And their feminisms have been undervalued and misunderstood. It is often an image used, especially by white feminists, but not only those, to say we're going to lift the veil, to perceive some of the biggest problems as the problems that ostensibly come from Muslim culture. This is beginning to introduce a whole other difficult topic, and therefore I didn't discuss it tonight. But I want us to understand that part of what we are doing in trying to dismantle the prison industrial complex, and doing it in an activist sense, but also here in the university, is to begin to think in these ways about what we can't see, about how we are criminalized, about how we are prevented from understanding each other, about how we are made to be alibis for each other's persecution. If, for example, as Ida B. Wells pointed out more than 100 years ago, white women were the only subjects the US government was interested in protecting. They were the only women who mattered. We should also pay attention to the way that the state often uses the excuse of protecting women, now including women of color, as an excuse to criminalize, as an excuse to deprive people of their rights, of their ability to associate with one another. And without paying attention to those feminisms that come from those communities, it is very difficult for us to make any sound judgments about the future. So in this way, I also say that this is about imagination. I am, after all, primarily a literature professor. But I love literature the way that I loved it when I was a child, because I went many places. I imagined many things. And I was unencumbered by facts. And in order to imagine an end to the prison industrial complex, we must similarly free ourselves of the facts. I'll quote you once more another famous African-American woman, a woman from the US. She's also from the 19th century. And her name was Anna Julia Cooper. She was, some call her, the first black woman feminist, because she was a writer very early on. And she wrote about how overstudied African Americans, black people in the United States, or colored people as they were known then, were. What she was saying was that the problem was not that there was a lack of representation, but in fact that there was an abundance of representation and that almost all of it was negative. And even if it was not negative, it was positive only to disprove the idea that black culture was so corrupt. Today, we need also the same kind of imagination. About the prison, we have an abundance of facts. I could recite to you for the entire evening the ways in which the prison is destroying people around the world. I could tell you about all the statistics. But I also need us to join together to be willing to imagine what else we might do to make ourselves feel safe. And for that, we must turn to each other and to activists and ordinary people who have been involved in trying to make their communities safe for a long time. All the while, those in the government, or the police force, or the military, purport or pretend to offer them safety. but are most responsible for taking that safety away. So I want you to understand that we can appreciate the difficulty and the worry in thinking about what will happen with all these people who are inside now. I mean, after all, do we just open up the doors? No. The process of abolition is a long one. But if we don't begin to discuss it, if we don't begin to discuss why we need abolition, and if we don't also begin to discuss how we need to imagine differently what other skills we need in order to begin the process, then we will never get there.